Massive flooding is creating a waterfall in a local Chinese market. The heavy rains drenching southern China expected to last 10 days. Authorities say flood control is now at a critical stage. For weeks, Beijing has been reporting on virus clusters in the capital, but are the figures trustworthy? An expert helps shed light on the numbers. The European Union is adopting new rules to protect its companies against subsidized foreign competitors. The move will cut down activities of Chinese state-owned companies operating in Europe. And China warning the U.S. against deploying intermediate-range missiles in the Indo-Pacific region. This after reports of U.S. negotiations with Japan. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Inside one neighborhood in Beijing, a group of workers are seen sealing a building's entrance. Medical staff wearing protective suits appear to be overseeing the job. Video shows occasional flashes of the residents inside the building. Beijing, China's capital city, seems to be turning into a second Wuhan. People are locked inside their own homes. Authorities say it's to control the pandemic. After the workers are finished, the entrance appears to have an airtight seal. A man inside is seen looking out from the second floor. One netizen took to social media to comment on the containment approach, calling it stupid and unacceptable. He questioned whether the goal was to eliminate the residents living there and asked what would happen if an elderly person or child inside the building needed to see a doctor. Another user asked what would happen if the building's fire alarm went off. According to the Chinese Communist Party's official media outlet, a virus patient had recently been in the neighborhood before his diagnosis. Confirmed cases also have been found at a nearby market only 10 minutes walk from the neighborhood. 10 neighborhoods in the surrounding area have also been locked down. In recent days, only a handful of medical teams traveled to Beijing to help fight the virus. But now 20 medical teams from 12 different provinces are headed there to help. According to reports, over 400,000 Beijing citizens per day can now be tested, and the number is still rising. But at the same time, not a single report from China has verified the accuracy of the testing kits. The virus has emerged in a special hospital inside Beijing. It's the designated hospital for the Communist Party leaders and the military, including the 7 members of the party's Standing Politburo Committee. That's the lawmaking panel that rules China, with leader Xi Jinping as its head. A resident from one Beijing neighborhood, home to military staff and their families, told us that the number 301 military hospital was hit by the virus. One nearby neighborhood was also impacted. He showed us an internal notice explaining that virus patients have now been discovered in many military camps due to the outbreak at the hospital. Messages about the hospital outbreak are circulating on social media. Speculation is rising that some Communist Party leaders may be infected. The focus is on one of the Politburo Committee's 7 members who nearly disappeared from Chinese media in June. There is no official explanation for the absence. The official is responsible for discipline inspection for the party's anti-corruption work. Chinese authorities have since issued a notice calling the information about virus cases in that hospital a rumor. For weeks, China has once again been reporting virus clusters in Beijing. But are the official figures trustworthy? And where did the second wave come from? We spoke with an expert for answers.
Beijing city authorities claim that since June, over 200 cases of the CCP virus have been found in Beijing so far. The entire capital city and its population of over 20 million people have been under lockdown and what's called wartime status for days now. Roads are blocked, most flights are suspended, schools and shops are once again closed. To shed some light on the situation, we spoke with former U.S. Army microbiologist and former lab director of the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research Viral Disease Branch, Sean Lin. Lin told us Beijing's strict protective measures tell a different story than the official narrative. He says they indicate that the situation in Beijing is much worse than the around 200 patients authorities have reported.
For so few cases, there is no need to block roads and put the whole city, all the neighborhoods, under lockdown. Once these measures are applied, there must be at least thousands of cases in the city.
At a market in Beijing, the virus was reportedly detected on cutting boards used to slice salmon. The fish was mainly imported from European countries. As a result, Chinese authorities restricted salmon imports and some cities ordered businesses to destroy salmon products. But due to the biological differences between humans and fish, it's almost impossible for a virus to jump directly from one to the other.
Fish, shrimp, these aquatic products, their viruses can rarely be transmitted to people because it has to adapt to the human body. There is a big gap between them. It's not a simple matter.
The Chinese regime says the genome sequence of the virus from Beijing's second wave has mutated and is now very similar to the virus from Europe. Therefore, officials claim Beijing's outbreak likely came from Europe. But Lin says it's too early to make that kind of conclusion. That's because due to the regime's cover-up of the pandemic, the virus from Beijing can't be compared with the virus found in other parts of China.
Since January, Chinese authorities have discouraged China's epidemic prevention departments or research institutions from performing genome sequencing. And we can see that in the gene bank after February and March, China has provided less and less test data.
Lin said he believes the virus never disappeared from China, despite the fact that the regime has been reporting 0 new virus cases for months.
People know nothing about the mutation of the virus in China. Very likely it has already mutated. In Wuhan, the virus never disappeared. The virus has been spreading among the Chinese population all this time.
Reporting by Sarah Liang, NTD News.
The heavy rainfall that soaked a vast area in southern China is hitting a new high today. State authorities say the emergency rescue efforts are now at a critical stage. NTD's Juliet Song has more.
A video surfacing online shows a local market in southwestern China overflowing with flood water. The water pouring into the river below, making a waterfall. China's longest river is entering flood season. State authorities say flood control and emergency rescue efforts are now at a critical stage. Since the beginning of June, southern China has been hit with 5 rounds of heavy rain, and some areas are seeing their worst flooding in decades. China's southwestern Guizhou province is among the worst hit. Floods have submerged villages in the mountains. A local resident said the floods triggered a mudslide.
Some houses were washed away. There's probably not much crop to harvest this year.
The rainstorm is expected to hit a new high this Thursday and to continue for the next 10 days. A Chinese water resources official says several of China's largest rivers could see flooding exceeding the warning level in the coming days. He said flood control is in a dire situation. Reporting by Yiru and Juliet Song, NTD News.
New details emerge on the meeting between U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and the Director of China's Central Foreign Affairs Office, Yang Jiechi. In a radio interview, Pompeo told the Liberty Times more about the closed-door meeting in Hawaii. He said while they have different views on many issues, the talks were constructive and both sides agreed to continue communications. During the meeting, China expressed dissatisfaction over the U.S. decision to sell F-16 fighter jets to Taiwan. But Pompeo pointed out the sales were consistent with those of past administrations. He also reiterated that the U.S. would not back out of the Indo-Pacific. The U.S. State Department approved the sale of 66 F-16 fighter jets to Taiwan last year. The officials also talked about trade relations. Yang said China would uphold the promises made in the Phase 1 trade deal. That includes buying over $36 billion worth of U.S. food and agro products by the end of 2020. China recently stepped up its purchases of U.S. soybeans. Beijing is warning Washington not to deploy intermediate-range missiles in the Indo-Pacific region. That's after reports of U.S. negotiations with Japan. China's Defense Ministry spokesperson said China opposes the move, adding that it will take measures to counter the move. China is also urging Japan not to accept the U.S. offer, saying Japan and other countries should say no to the U.S. and not fall victim to what the Chinese regime calls the U.S. geopolitical plot. Intermediate-range missiles have a short flight duration. That makes them hard to detect and defend against, and they're considered highly dangerous. New York State Senator Chris Jacobs has introduced a bill to stop state employees from downloading video sharing app TikTok on their work phones. TikTok is owned by Chinese developer ByteDance. The app is popular among young people and is used to create short videos. It reportedly surpassed 2 billion downloads in April. But the app has recently sparked privacy concerns. That's because China's national intelligence law allows Beijing access to data collected by the company. It also censors content that's critical of the Chinese regime. The app has already been banned in a number of federal agencies, including the Departments of State and Homeland Security. Senator Jacobs pointed to TikTok's history of untrustworthiness when he announced the bill. That's including its practice of censoring in the U.S., refusing to testify in congressional hearings, and the fact that several of its corporate board members are also members of the Chinese Communist Party. The European Union is adopting new rules to protect its companies against subsidized foreign competitors. The move will curtail the activities of Chinese state-owned companies operating in Europe. Last week, the European Commission published a report detailing how foreign subsidies distort fair trade by taking interest-free loans, capital injections, and preferential tax treatment. That leaves companies without access to those subsidies at a major disadvantage. In the past decade, through heavy government subsidies, China has managed to create its own national champions in key industries like steel, aluminum, solar panels, and more recently, in high-technology sectors. The new legal measures by the European Commission, which will be finalized and released next year, will block Chinese bargain buyers from acquiring distressed European companies during the pandemic. It will also, as put by the Commission's vice president, tackle unchecked foreign subsidies that distort fair competition. Hong Kong's Legislative Council election is set to take place this September, but it's facing interference from the Chinese Communist Party. Candidates planning to run for the election will be required to take an oath of office, which includes showing support for the controversial national security law proposed by mainland China. Failure to comply could result in the candidate's disqualification. The new so-called security law will effectively allow Beijing to overrule Hong Kong's legal system. People found in violation of the law could be extradited to mainland China and tried in courts under direct Communist Party control. U.S. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross is defending a new rule to curb chip sales to Huawei. Critics say it's full of loopholes, but Ross disagrees.
U.S. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross says the government sees no loopholes in a new rule to curb global chip sales to China's Huawei. Last month, the U.S. released a new export rule to block Huawei from getting chips made with U.S. technology. It allows the U.S. to require licenses for shipments of some foreign-made chips to Huawei. But some industry lawyers say the new rule is too complex, unclear, and filled with gaps. Some allege it leaves key transactions outside the scope of control. In its statement to Reuters, Ross said, "The Department of Commerce does not see any loopholes in this rule. We affirm that we will implement the rule aggressively and pursue any attempt to evade its intent." The statement comes after Reuters reported that the Commerce Department sent a letter to some chip makers to shed more light on the rule. But industry lawyers said the letter didn't really clear things up. The U.S. blacklisted Huawei last year over national security concerns, alleging the Chinese regime could use Huawei equipment for espionage. Huawei denies the allegations. Huawei has close ties to the Chinese military. Its founder was a department director in China's People's Liberation Army. And all Chinese companies, including Huawei, have to hand over intelligence information to Beijing if the regime asks for it. As a result, American companies needed to get special licenses to do business with Huawei. The Department of Commerce last week amended the restrictions on Huawei in one regard, to allow U.S. companies to participate in standard setting for next-generation technologies.
New York City is finally in phase 2 of the state's reopening plan. Here's a look at how some retailers are reopening.
New York City residents are gradually emerging from over 100 days on lockdown. Some are celebrating the city's reopening by shopping at stores like Barnes & Noble, who are once again opening their doors to customers. But only a few made it out to the bookseller's Upper West Side location one day after reopening. Things are a bit different due to virus precautions and social distancing. The store's CEO says all physical retailers are asking the existential question, why do we matter? And should we exist now that people rely so much on online shopping?
The online experience, although efficient and effective, and we at Barnes & Noble benefited from it hugely, massive growth in our online sales. Actually, our customers want to come back into our stores. And we found, as we've opened, that people have been really sort of almost joyous to get back into a physical bookstore where they can choose books again.
New York City is the last region moving into phase 2 of the state's reopening plan. If everything goes as planned, museums will be able to open on July 20th. The Metropolitan Museum of Art plans to reopen in late August after closing its doors on March 13th. The museum's president says they're eagerly awaiting the reopening. Many theaters, orchestras, and dance companies plan to reopen in 2021. And although it's still 6 months away, New York officials say they're starting to think about Christmas. According to a Bloomberg report, Rockefeller Center will set up a Christmas tree for the 2020 season. People will also be able to skate on the center's ice rink, but officials expect smaller crowds than usual.
Here at China in Focus, we dedicate ourselves to bringing you truthful, unbiased reporting. Don't forget to like and subscribe for the latest updates, and see you tomorrow.